Good morning. Welcome to the Brookfield Unitarian Universalist Church, both in person and on Zoom. My name is Alyssa Lee. My pronouns are she or they, and the minister here. And I'm glad you're here. I now invite any members of our membership committee present this morning to please stand and give a quick wave. They're right behind us. They'll be available after this service to show you around and answer any questions about the church if you are new here, or just want to have some questions answered. If you're also new here, if you'd like to sign our guest book in the entryway so that we can get a copy of our latest newsletter to you, that would be great. It's back this way. That'll give you an idea of who we are and what is going on at our church. And speaking of who we are, this congregation is genuine warmth and welcome at the heart of everything we do. In that spirit, I invite everyone present to turn and either briefly greet or wave to one another. I'm waving at Zoom. Yes, and the Zoomers are waving back. Thank you. A reminder. They're saying that this side is maybe a little light, so maybe you can speak closer. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you. A reminder to pick up your name tag on the way to coffee hour, which is in the parlor over here. If you don't have a name tag and would like one, there are directions on how to get one on the board at the back of the sanctuary. Reminder, masks are now optional during worship and at coffee hour, and as always, please no food or drink in the sanctuary here. The restroom is located down these stairs and is accessible via the stairs or this lift off the parlor. Further announcements are listed on the back of your order of service today, but if anybody has any announcements, I'd welcome them now. Layla, please.
Two. One in my music capacity. Next Sunday, the choir is participating in a choir festival in Newton. It's in your order of service, and it's a free concert in celebration of the Newton congregation's 175th. I know, they're just a baby, but we're celebrating with them. And the choir will be singing two pieces on its own as well as with a bigger group. I'm also here representing Sarah Swift with a reminder about our collection for the migrants in Sturbridge, and a reminder that the needs change every week. The new list is on the mantle next to the if you're interested, pick up the new list. The good news is they now have WIC cards, so their needs for volunteer have changed. And now if anybody has a used stroller, for example, they could really use that. Check out the list, and thank you for your continued donations.
And you may have said this, but the donation is, the box is in the front.
Yes, in the foyer.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any announcements? Okay. The theme this month is heritage. And our heritage as Unitarian Universalists is often one to be proud of, particularly how the ministers and laity of our tradition answered the call when the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. asked for their support in Selma, Alabama, which we'll be talking about later today. But history can be complex and full of times when people both stepped into the roles they were meant to play, and at other times when they fell short or missed the mark completely. The question we may have for ourselves today is, what is calling us to act, and how are we responding? Let us now begin our worship. Our first hymn is in the gray hymnal. It's number 153, Oh, I Woke Up This Morning. Now, this is a song that is only listed as an African-American spiritual. So you know someone must have written this and given labor to it, but it just shows from the time people's names were erased and unfortunately forgotten to history. So let's hopefully take a moment to remember the person who wrote this song and the hope and the joy that they were trying to give to the community that they were a part of. I hope you will please rise, either in body or spirit, if you will rise. And, you know, it's supposed to be a fun song, so if some clapping gets involved, that would be awesome too. So number 153. Please rise. Thank you for that, Layla. That was wonderful. Our cellist lighting today comes from Adam Slate. He writes, I'm sorry. I would like to invite the youth and children to come up and join us for that. We gather this morning as one community, a community united by common ideals: love, justice, diversity, freedom, mutual care, equity. Yet look around. Look at the faces of those around you. Each face represents an individual. Every one of us with our own story, needs, strengths, and faults. We light our chalice today, honoring our common connection and also the uniqueness that lives within each of us. So please join me in reading our affirmation that you will find printed in your order of service. I believe we have a few people who are going to lead us with the together. Is that right? Together. We unite in an atmosphere of care and support to foster spiritual health and growth. Together. Focus on sharing our ideas and histories with warmth, hope, nurture stability for our daily lives, and seek motivation to reach out to the larger community. One of the ways we reach out to the larger community is through our support of the Brookfield Ecumenical Food Pantry. If you brought a donation, you're invited to come forward and place it in this basket here at the front of the sanctuary. If you didn't bring a donation to the food pantry or are attending via Zoom but would like to contribute, you're invited to mail in a donation or to leave a monetary donation in the envelope in the basket. 3/4 of the monetary donations goes to the Minister's Benevolence Fund, and 1/4 goes to the operation expenses of the food pantry. Thank you for sharing with your neighbors. Our first reading today is Gate A4. It's a poem by Naomi Shiabnai. Now, I just want to give you a heads up. She has phonetically spelled out a few Arabic words in this poem, so if you find my utterances lacking, it's probably mostly my fault, but I just wanted to let you all know in case we have any fluent speakers here. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal, after learning my flight had been delayed 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing. "Help," said the flight attendant. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late, and she did this." I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke haltingly. "Shadual Shabiduk Habibti, Stani Shwe Min Fadlik Shubit Siwi." The minute she heard any word she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical treatment the next day. I said, "No, we're fine. You'll get there. Just later. Who is picking you up? Let's call him." We called her son. I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and ride next to her. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons, just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up to 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, from her bag, and she was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such an old country tradition. Always carry a plant, always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Now is the time for our offering. This summer I went to, I've told a few people this story, but this summer I went to the General Assembly in Pittsburgh, which is the large conference for Unitarian Universalism, and I met someone who was an Army chaplain, and they said that they got their first start with UUism here at this congregation. They came in as a young adult, paint-smeared jeans, they said, and they thought, no way anybody is gonna accept me at a church, and everybody did, and that's what set them on the path now to be a chaplain. So, like I said, our theme this month is heritage, and I've heard from more than one minister that they either got their start here or they did pulpit supply, and it was very encouraging to them. So, there is a great heritage from this congregation that you all are giving to the wider faith. So when you support this congregation, you're also supporting, who knows, we may have fledgling ministers and chaplains and other people in our midst, and you're supporting that continued work that could reverberate for generations you don't even know. So. Sorry, Lila. I forgot to say anything about donating online. I apologize. Sorry, I'm still learning this. I just wanted to say quickly, those joining us by Zoom can make an offering or pledge anytime using one of the options in the order of service. Also, people here in person, if you would like to do so online, you can later. And I thank you all for any generosity that you have. Thank you. Please join me in the spirit of prayer or meditation. Let's all take a deep breath in and out. Another deep breath in and out. Spirit of life and of love, holy mystery who holds us and calls us home to our true selves. We mark another difficult week full of images and stories some of us might be trying hard to shut out or make peace with. Let us take time today to rest in the silence of our own interconnectedness, of the peace that can come from belonging to a community of different people who share a collective of peace and justice, and for whom love is a centering promise. Let us allow for the silence and the shared breathing to connect us to ourselves and to each other. Amen. Our reading today is by the Reverend Howard Thurman. It's an excerpt from his book, Meditations of the Heart, called No Man is an Island. A little bit about Reverend Thurman. He's my personal theological hero, but he's often considered the minister to the civil rights movement. A book that he wrote, which I would highly recommend, called Jesus and the Disinherited, was a book that Martin Luther King Jr. kept with him in his breast pocket at all times. He's often the one that is said to have inspired them to follow nonviolence as a movement. So, and though he was not UU, he was invited to work on the Unitarian Commission for Intergroup Relations, so we do have some association with him. This is kind of a longer reading, but I think it's worth it, so I hope you'll stick with me. No man is an island, no man lives alone. These words from a poem by John Donne have been set to music and have become the theme of a variety of radio programs which are concerned with aspects of social responsibility. It is of crucial importance for each person to consider how he relates himself to the society of which, of necessity, he is a part. There we go. For many people, and at times for most of us, it is a part of our dreaming to be let alone, to be free of all involvement in the responsibilities of life and for others. This is but natural. Often the mood passes. Sometimes we say that our personal load is so heavy that it is all we can do to look after ourselves with all that that entails. Even as we express such ideas, we are reminded of a wide variety of events, that we are never ourselves alone. We are not an island. We do not live alone. There is no alternative to the insistence that we cannot escape from personal responsibility for the social order in which we live. We are part of the society in which we function. There can be no health for us if we lose our sense of personal responsibility for the social order. This means that there must be participation in the social process, and that quite specifically. Such participation means the wise and critical use of the ballot, the registering of our intent to share responsibility in government. The moral inference is that there must not be a condemnation of the political process of society if we have been unwilling to stand up and be counted on behalf of the kind of government in which we believe and for which we are willing to work and sacrifice. Where social change seems to be urgent, we must share in that process as responsible, law-abiding citizens. The ethical values by which we live must be implemented on the level of social change. This calls ever for a careful evaluation of the means to which we give our support. The means which we are willing to use must not be in real conflict with the ends in which our values inspire. Practically, this means that if we believe in democracy, for instance, we must not be a party to means that make use of bigotry, prejudice, and hate. We must search and find the facts that are needed for judgment and cast our lot on the side of the issues which we are willing to embrace as our private and personal ends. And working on behalf of such ends, which are morally right, as we see right, we shall not cooperate with or be a party to means that seem to us evil, means that we would not use in our personal private life. In this sense, we are our brother's keeper, for we will not demand of anyone that they do on behalf of society as a whole what as persons we would be loath to do ourselves if we were in their place. Our second reading is in the purple hymnal, hymn 29, Danos un Corazon. Now Nubia is going to actually sing the first verse with Lila playing, and then we'll all join in and sing all three verses. And if you're interested, the translation is on the next page over, but you might stick with the number 29 for now. Please rise. Thank you, Nubia, for your help with that. I want to say before I get started that I am going to be talking about some difficult things that happened in history. So, take care of yourself. You're adults, so if you need to leave, I won't be offended in the slightest. At 4:57 a.m. on Monday, March 8, 1965, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. sent off a telegram from Selma, Alabama that in the vicious maltreatment of defenseless citizens of Selma, where old women and young children were gassed and clubbed at random, we have witnessed an eruption of the disease of racism which seeks to destroy all of America. No American is without responsibility. All are involved in the sorrow that rises from Selma to contaminate every crevice of our national life. The people of Selma will struggle on for the soul of the nation, but it is fitting that all of America help to bear the burden. I call, therefore, on clergy of all faiths, representative of every part of the country, to join me for a minister's march to Montgomery on Tuesday morning, March 9th. In this way, all America will testify to the fact that the struggle in Selma is for the survival of democracy everywhere in our land. As many of you know, on Sunday, March 7th, so preceding this telegram, a group led by the chairman of SNCC, otherwise known as the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, who later became U.S. Senator John Lewis, set off on foot to walk from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama, which is about 54 miles. March that day did not go as far as the 600 peaceful African-American marchers because they were met by state troopers and the local sheriff's posse, who charged, trampled, clubbed, and tear-gassed the marchers. People around the country watched in horror as the news that night telecasted what happened. And when the Unitarian Universalist Association, or the UUA, headquarters received Dr. King's telegram, the then president of the UUA, Dana McLean Greeley, wrote in the margins of his copy that the director of the UUA Social Responsibility Department, Homer Jack, should alert some of the men and go. Unfortunately, women were not considered as part of that, but that'll be a sermon for another time. At that time, the different regions were divided into districts, and most of the district executives east of the Mississippi were asked to send ministers. Additionally, Orloff Miller, who was director of the UUA's Office of College Centers, began phoning across the country to college center clergy with whom he had worked. For his part, Dr. King also made a call to a UU minister he knew from Boston University School of Theology, Gene Reeves. Many UU ministers jumped at the chance to go. They hitched rides in cars and on buses, and many such as Clark Olson in Berkeley, California, who didn't have the financial means, were met with messages when they arrived home or at their offices that members of the congregation had already paid for their way to go. On the Tuesday afternoon, after Dr. King's telegram went out, the UUs caucused and they found there were 45 ministers and 15 lay people. And after 2 days, there were approximately 60 ministers in Selma, which was nearly 10% of the active parish ministry. On that Tuesday at 3 p.m., 2,500 marchers set out from the Brown Chapel AME to the Pettus Bridge. At one point, a federal marshal stepped forth to read out a federal injunction against the march, but the marchers continued. As they marched over the crest of the bridge, the marchers were met by 500 Alabama state troopers blocking the highway. Dr. King, along with the nuns, priests, rabbis, and ministers, knelt to pray. He then rose and led the marchers back to the Brown Chapel AME. At the rally that followed, Dr. King explained that the state of Alabama was clearly reluctant to beat up a mixed racial group of people, and more people were on their way. So he felt they should use that time to work through the courts. So he asked for anyone that could to stay. One UU minister that decided to stay at the last minute was Reverend James Reeb, a white minister who had forsaken parish ministry so that he could work and live in the African American community in Roxbury, Massachusetts. When Reeb, the father of 4 children, originally got the call about Dr. King's telegram, he responded to his wife Marie's plea of, "There are others to go, you belong here," with, "No, I belong there. It's the kind of fight I belong in, I believe in. I want to be a part of it. Every man who can go is needed." On that Tuesday evening, after kneeling and praying at the Pettus Bridge, and after calling his wife at home to say that everything was well and he would be home soon, Reeb and a number of other UU clergy met for dinner. Afterward, Reeb, along with the Office of College Centers, Orloff Miller, and Minister of the Berkeley Fellowship, Olson, were making their way back to the Brown Chapel when they were attacked by a group of white men, one of whom hit Reeb in the head with either a baseball bat or a large piece of pipe. The other 2 were also brutally attacked. By the time the men made it to the SCLC, which is the Southern Christian Leadership Council office nearby, Reeb was in great pain. Through a variety of circumstances, largely because the threats to their safety and the local police's unwillingness to provide an escort, it took hours for Reeb to receive medical care in Birmingham, which is about an hour away from Montgomery. By that time, he'd fallen into a coma, and he died 2 days later. Both President Johnson and Dr. King called Reeb's widow, Marie, to express their condolences. There were a number of memorial services for Reverend Reeb throughout the country, attended by dignitaries, including one in Selma, in which he was eulogized by a number of high-profile religious leaders, such as Dr. King himself. The night of Reeb's memorial service, President Johnson addressed a joint session of Congress and introduced the voting rights bill with his now famous words, "At times history and fate meet at a single time and a single place to shape a turning point in man's unending search for freedom. So it was at Lexington and Concord, so it was a century ago at Appomattox, so it was last week in Selma, Alabama. There, long-suffering men and women peacefully protested the denial of their rights as Americans. Many were brutally assaulted. One good man, a man of God, was killed." However, it should be noted that Reeb was not the only good man who lost his life in the fight in Selma. On February 18th, 1965, so just maybe about a month earlier, Jimmy Lee Jackson, an African-American 26-year-old Army veteran, was shot while he was attending a nighttime rally in March in nearby Marion. A trooper began beating Jackson's grandfather and mother, so he tried to protect them and was shot at close range. He died 8 days later to little notice in the media or amongst major national politicians or other dignitaries. And while it should not go unnoticed that though it was courageous for the UU ministers and other laity to drop everything and go to Selma for support, SNCC and later the SCLC had been there for years. The Catholic Church had also been there for a long time. Many UU ministers recount marching arm in arm with nuns who had been deeply embedded in that community for decades. In February of 1965, after another march, SCLC leader C.T. Vivian said when he said the thin line of whites walking 4 by 4, demonstrating in support of equal rights, he thought, "Damn, the kingdom's come." But also, where have you been? After Reeb's murder, Dr. King met with a few of the UU leaders and said he would understand, given the situation, if they wanted to return home. But they decided to stay and participate in the March to Montgomery, and even more UUs came. An anonymous member of the Bloomington, Indiana church put up money to charter a plane for a group to come down. 90 people flew in from Denver. 2 buses were chartered from Rochester, New York, carrying 150 people, and a plane was chartered from Boston carrying 75 people. On the final day, among 30,000 people who marched, about 500 were UU lay people and 250 ministers, including the UUA president at the time, Dana McLean Greeley. A block from the State House in Montgomery, Alabama, Dr. King addressed the crowd. This was at the end of the march. He said, "So I stand before you this afternoon with the conviction that segregation is on its deathbed in Alabama, and the only thing uncertain about it is how costly the segregationists and Wallace will make the funeral." A day on the march, however, was the murder that evening of UU layperson Viola Luzo. A mother of 5 children, she had driven from Detroit to join the march. And after the march, she was ferrying marchers back from Montgomery to Selma. She was heading back to Montgomery to pick up another group when a car pulled up beside her and shot her in the head, killing her instantly. So why have I told you all of this? For starters, I think it's important for us to know our UU history. I personally had not heard of Reeb or Luzo until I went to seminary. I never heard about them in my UU congregation. So I think it's important for us to hear about them, and also the ministers, the other forebears who went to that march and who worked towards equality. I also think it is important to remember that for many UUs, our faith is tied to social action, not doctrine. I'm also talking about it because it's important to remember that those of us who I recognize is not everyone here, may be sometimes called to put ourselves in a variety of ways on the line for others amongst us, both here and in our wider community, who have marginalized identities. And also a recognition that the call to action is often not coming from inside the house, but is more an invitation to show up and support the work of others doing good in our community and our nation. Even people who might not have the same political or religious views as ourselves. And that those relationships formed doing this work can be some of the most meaningful relationships we can have. Now, does this mean that I think we should all run out and start marching for causes that we believe in? Sure, that's what you're into, go for it. But I also think there's a myriad of ways for us to support causes both within our faith tradition and without. As a longtime organizer, I tend to think focusing on building relationships of trust and care between ourselves and others doing work we find valuable within our community can often be the most effective, especially when those people might look at the world a little bit differently than you. Those relationships are the reason someone like Reverend Gene Reeves was called personally by Dr. Martin Luther King to come to Selma and assist. And before Selma, a number of UU ministers and laity around the country had built connections with the Black communities in their area through their work with the NAACP, the Urban League, and other community partners. In the book Selma Awakening, from which I took much of the history for this sermon, the Reverend and historian Mark Morrison Reed said that the groundwork for the UU's response in Selma had been laid between the decades between the end of the Second World War and the March on Selma. He says Unitarians and Universalists supported school desegregation, open housing, equal access, and immigration. And the majority of their ministers reckoned with racial justice in some way. And this is not to say that they did not have a lot to grow on, and as many of them admit, they were fairly late to the party in many places, such as Selma. But the groundwork was being laid. So what does that mean for us who are continuing our legacy? And what does that mean now? So I'm still new to your community, so I'm not sure where to get involved, but I know you likely do, and I would be interested to hear about it from you. And I'm genuinely appreciative of the way this congregation has been stepping up to provide essentials for the newly settled migrants in this community. And I hope this is just the first step toward building relationships with both our new neighbors and also the community partners and other faith communities that are providing support for them. Within our own UU faith tradition, there are churches all over the country who need our support. There are UU congregations in the thick of the anti-LGBTQ, especially anti-trans bills. In many red states, the UU congregation is one of the few places that trans and genderqueer people, and in fact, many LGBTQIA people in general, can find a place to be their full, beautiful selves. And we always talk about how educated UUs are, or tend to be. Well, the teachers and librarians in many of our congregations are torn between being afraid of losing their jobs and providing the best instruction they can for the students in their care. In my home state, the State Department of Education recently sent an email to all the teachers in the state to catalog the books in their classroom libraries and the school's library and turn it into the state. So out of fear, teachers and school librarians are just pulling books off the shelves. A lot of the teachers are just taking them home. These are books that could be life-giving and affirming for many students with marginalized identities. And these people need our support. Even if all we do is send them an email or a letter to say, we see you and we stand in solidarity. I was speaking with an organizer from back home in Oklahoma, and she said a main frustration she has is that often people in blue states, which she is originally from, will say, well, you voted for them, it's your fault, or can't you just leave? And the truth is, for a variety of reasons involving money, family, and who knows what, they can't leave. And as we've seen even recently in Alabama, these states are so gerrymandered that it can almost be impossible to effectuate change in a meaningful way by voting. Unless we fall into the everything is all right here in New England trap, there are threats to LGBTQA communities here, as well as migrants and other marginalized groups. In fact, in Marlborough, about a month ago, neo-Nazis held a protest at one of the hotels housing many of the newly settled migrants. And I will also say, as someone coming from the outside, racism is alive and well here in Massachusetts. And almost no one wants to talk about it, seemingly anyways. I hear a lot about people out there in the rest of the country, but it is often the complete silence around race, disability, or class, sexual orientation, or gender identity that astounds me here in this blue state. And I've seen it all here in Massachusetts, all types of discrimination. This place is not immune, it's just very quiet about it. My hope is that we're able to look to the examples of our UU ancestors and step up when we are called, but also that we learn from their mistakes and that we do better. That we build real communities of trust and working relationships with those who perhaps look or worship differently from us. That we reach out to our UUs in states that are struggling, let them know that we have not forgotten about them and we stand firmly in their corner. That we remember today and always that we are a people of justice and we are not afraid to speak up and speak out. Amen. Be. Our next hymnal is number 396. This is going to be a round. I know this rows will open. First, we're going to sing it in unison twice, and then Lila is going to lead us on the round twice. Yeah, so everyone's got to sing out, and please rise and body your spirit. So we'll sing it together. May the week ahead remind you of yourself, remind you of those who have formed you and loved you into being. May you look up at the stars and feel that you are home or will be home soon. May you know with certainty that this universe cares for you and that your place in it has meaning and is beautiful. May you go in peace, surrounded by the love of this community today and always. Amen.